Okay, so imagine a world that's just being completely torn apart. You've got new technology popping up everywhere, inequality is skyrocketing, and all these radical new ideas are in the air. Sounds a lot like today, right? Well, this was 1891, and right in the middle of all this chaos, the Vatican drops an absolute bombshell, a document that would challenge the very foundations of this new industrial world. It was called Rerum Novarum, and it proposed a truly radical third way.
You know, at the end of the 19th century, it really felt like you had just two options on the table. You could either go all in on this ruthless winner-take-all capitalism, or you could join the call for a workers' revolution to just tear the whole system down. They seemed like the only two choices. And then Pope Leo XIII steps into the ring and says, "Hold on, there's another way."
Now, to really get why this was so revolutionary, we have to understand the world it was born into. The late 1800s, they weren't just a time of progress. For a lot of people, they were a time of deep, deep crisis. The Industrial Revolution had basically created this giant pressure cooker of social and economic turmoil, and believe me, it was about to explode.
So let's look at the two extremes that were pulling society apart. On one side, you had this idea of laissez-faire capitalism. The argument was basically that the government should keep its hands off the economy, completely. And yeah, this led to incredible wealth, but it also caused immense suffering. Then on the other side, you had revolutionary socialism, which looked at that whole system and said, this is corrupt. The only answer, they argued, was for workers to seize control of everything, by force if they had to.
And for the average person, the reality was pretty grim. I mean, they called it the Gilded Age, and it looked all shiny on the surface, but underneath all that, you had millions of workers facing incredibly dangerous conditions, grueling hours, and wages that kept them in poverty. It was a world where laborers in these new factories often worked 50% more than their peasant ancestors did back in the Middle Ages. Think about that. This kind of desperation, well, it fueled the rise of unions, massive strikes, and this growing feeling that society was just fundamentally broken.
And right into this firestorm steps Pope Leo XIII. Now, the church had historically been pretty wary of all these modern economic theories, but Leo realized that silence just wasn't an option anymore. He decided to confront the chaos head-on by issuing an encyclical, that's a major papal letter, that would speak directly to this social question.
The document was called Rerum Novarum, which in Latin literally means of new things. And that's exactly what it was all about. It was the church's first real major attempt to systematically tackle all the new things of the modern world: industrialization, capital, labor, and the fierce, bitter conflict between them.
But this wasn't just some knee-jerk reaction against everything modern. Leo's approach was actually rooted in this philosophy called neo-scholasticism. The best way to think of it is like dusting off ancient wisdom. He was taking these timeless moral principles about things like justice and human dignity from thinkers like Thomas Aquinas and applying them to the brand new, urgent problems of the factory floor. The goal wasn't to turn back the clock, but to guide this new world toward a more just and humane future.
So, what did this third way actually look like? Well, Rerum Novarum laid out a blueprint for economic justice that was frankly a radical critique of both the excesses of capitalism and the core principles of socialism. It offered a vision where morality and ethics weren't separate from economics. They were absolutely essential to it.
The Encyclical's whole starting point is the worker. It made this profound declaration that human labor is not just another input in a factory, like coal or steel. It's personal, it's human, and because of that, it has an inherent dignity. What that means is you can't just buy and sell a person's work without respecting the actual person doing it.
And building right on top of that, the document introduced the concept of a just wage. And let me tell you, this was a game changer. It argued that a fair wage isn't just whatever a boss can get away with paying. No, it must be enough to support a worker and their family with dignity. A wage that leaves a family in poverty, even if the worker technically agreed to it, is fundamentally unjust. Now, in a direct shot at socialism, Leo XIII strongly defended the right to private property. He saw it as a natural right, something that allows people to provide for themselves and their families. But, and this is a huge but, he insisted that this right is not absolute. He said property comes with a kind of social mortgage. It has to be used in a way that serves the common good. That's the well-being of the entire community, not just the owner's greed. So what about the government? Well, in a direct rebuttal to that hands-off capitalism, the Encyclical argued that the state has a moral duty to intervene in the economy, not to control everything, but to act as a referee, to protect the rights of the poor and the vulnerable,
to prevent exploitation, and to make sure that the economy serves all of society, not just the powerful few.
You see, the Encyclical didn't just pick a side in the class war. Instead, it proposed this framework of mutual duties. As you can see here, workers were called on to be honest and respect property, but employers had an even greater set of duties: to respect their workers' dignity, to pay a just wage, and to provide safe conditions. The goal wasn't class struggle, it was social harmony. So when you boil it all down, the document makes this really critical distinction. It saw the problems with capitalism as abuses of a system that could be reformed with a strong dose of morality and justice. Socialism, on the other hand, it saw as fundamentally flawed, because its rejection of private property, family, and religion was seen as contrary to natural law, that idea that some rights and moral values are just inherent to being human.
And Rerum Novarum wasn't just some one-off statement that got filed away. No, it was a seed that would grow for over a century, creating a tradition of thought that continues to shape our world right now.
Over the next century, you see popes returning to these themes again and again and again. They issued new encyclicals to apply the core principles of Rerum Novarum to totally new challenges: the Great Depression, the Cold War, globalization, and even, as you see here, the environmental crisis. Each one of these builds on that foundation that was laid back in 1891.
And this is the key takeaway. This single document became the cornerstone of what we now call Catholic social teaching, a really rich body of thought that continues to challenge our assumptions about justice, economics, and what it means to build a good society.
But, okay, is any of this still relevant? I mean, does a 19th century papal letter really have anything to say to our 21st century world of AI and the gig economy? Well, the parallels might be a lot closer than you think. Just consider this number, 50%. That 50%, that represents the share of all global wealth that's owned by just the top 1% of the population. That is a level of concentration that mirrors the very same Gilded Age inequality that made Pope Leo write Rerum Novarum in the first place. And the connection gets even clearer when you listen to this quote, straight from the original document. A small number of very rich men have been able to lay upon the teeming masses of the laboring poor a yoke little better than that of slavery itself. That was written over 130 years ago, but doesn't it sound like it could have been pulled from today's headlines? Which really leaves us with a final question. In an age of gig work, global supply chains, and these vast economic divides, are the principles of human dignity, just wages, and the common good still a radical third way? Is this 130-year-old blueprint still relevant for building a more just economy today?